Welcome to If I Did It, a show where we analyze PR kerfuffles from the world of MMA and beyond. I'm your host, Alexi Old, and with us, as always, is Kid Nate of Bloody Elbow and Eugene S. Robinson from Aussie.com and Fight. Everything you ever wanted to know about ass kicking, but we're afraid you get your ass kicked for asking.
And notice how he maintained eye contact, which means he wasn't reading.
I was not.
He's just trying to make me look bad at this point.
You know what I think it is? I think it's the ever. It's the ever. I want to say always wanted to know, but it's ever.
No.
That's the thing that messes me up.
Yeah, but you did it. You did it with eye contact. So that was good.
I did. Thank you very much. So, Eugene, why should people listen to the advice you have to proffer?
I've been in media since 1977. One of the first writers on MMA in the world. Time at Intel, Adobe, Apple, Nikon, as well as Ziff Davis, Future Publishing, and lastly and most significantly with HarperCollins for the Fight book, as well as the last 3 years at Aussie.com, time with Vice. And I've run a record label, so I'm adept at weaseling out of PR kerfuffles.
How about you, Kid Nate?
Well, with my compere here, with Google making him look like his lips are moving and the sound is all whacked. It's like watching a kung fu movie on the Rodriguez channel, whatever it is. But I've done PR and political campaigns and corporate consulting for almost 20 years. John Kerry, Mark Warner, 2 senators, worked on presidential campaigns, yada, yada, yada. Firestone, AT&T, Crisis Communications. I saw $1 million in cash once.
Oh.
Monsanto.
Yeah, Monsanto. That was a very small project, one-time thing. And I hate the Dodgers. It's just a new hat I got as a present. So
I was gonna say something. I was just gonna say something, but you beat me to it. So
yeah. See, that's how you handle PR. You get out in front of it.
That's right.
Right.
And I'm
right.
And I'm Alexi Old. I'm an artist, an author, an attorney, consultant. I'm a bit of everything. Been helping out people, individuals, corporations, nonprofits. Also worked on the Hill for a while with their crisis, PR, and legal and business issues. And we are here. Speaking of organizations, Eugene, you're the Nevada Athletic Commission. You recently suspended Nick Diaz.
You mean I'm a big asshole?
We already knew that, Eugene. That's
yeah, ding. Okay.
But with power of suspension.
Yeah.
You've suspended Nick Diaz for 5 years for a marijuana drug test failure. The blowback has been immense, with over 100,000 signatures on a petition to the White House and multiple mainstream media figures, including Cher, protesting the sentence. MMA Fighting broke the story that you are in negotiations with Diaz's legal team and the UFC's lawyers to negotiate a reduced suspension that could put the fighter back in the cage next year. If it is true, how do you, Eugene, as the Nevada Athletic Commission, roll out the walk back?
You just do it, man. You just do it. This is like you're 4 years old. Your dad says, do you want me to pull the Band-Aid off fast, or do you want it to be slow? And if you're smart and you're 4 years old, you go, do it fast, Dad. And then he rips it off, and then you're done. Because the news churn, the news cycle is so fast that, give it a week, there'll be something else that'll wash this on the table. What's happened is the decision that they've made has inserted them. It's like steroids, right? Oral steroids versus injectable steroids. Now, if you take Maxabolin, say it's a steroid tablet, and you swallow this, your liver attempts to immediately metabolize it, right? Much worse on your liver. Your liver works overtime. You take an injection, you get multiple passes. Your liver, this is hi liver, and your liver goes, oh, we'll deal with that, and then it comes around again, hi liver, and liver, it deals with that. The news cycle is such that you want to be like the injectable. You don't want to be like the injectable. You don't want to keep coming around and having people think about it once a week, and Diaz comes up in the Twitter feed and the trending. You don't want that. You want it to be metabolized all at once. So if they're smart, they'll just not say anything. They'll say, we've looked at all the facts, figures, we've consulted, we're thinking about what's best for the sport, what's best for the fighters moving forward. We're going to pull back the suspension. Good luck, we'll see you later. Forget our names. Forget you ever saw us.
How about you, Nate?
Well, I'm going to roll out a couple of things. When I was a young kid working with consultants, and I would go into meetings with these people and sort of be baffled by the details of the new project and everything. And then these consultants that I worked with, guys like Mark McKinnon, Matthew Dowd, and Jeff Eller, these guys would just, boom, here's what you do, here's what you do. And years later I realized, they have like a template and they use it over and over again. And there's a couple of principles that are applicable in this one. One is surrogates. Get other people to talk about this. Let Nick Diaz do the talking. Let Nick Diaz's attorney do the talking. Let the UFC and their attorneys do the talking. Keep your mouth shut and stay out of it. Let other people handle it. That's called surrogates, and that's a very effective tool. The second one is bury it. Put it out on a Friday.
Yep.
Make sure that the deal negotiates maybe Friday before a holiday weekend, maybe Friday of a big UFC event, so you've got weigh-ins and fights and all this other stuff going on, so It just gets buried and lost. This is how politicians and government agencies, when they have a lot of bad news to put out, they just dump a huge bunch of crap out on a Friday. People read it, some people are going to deep dive in it, but most people are just going to see it and move on, and so just like Eugene said, just get it done with quick, let somebody else do the talking, and move on. Because they screwed up bad.
Yep. And you definitely don't want the person caught in all the clips. You don't want them doing any more talking. No more talkie. No more you stand down. Don't want your face. Don't want in fact, have somebody else make the announcement. We want to forget about you as quickly as possible.
Yeah, if somebody from the NAC has to be involved in announcing it, let it be the executive director. Let the commissioner stay well away from this, especially the blonde woman and the smarmy dude that makes such jackasses out of themselves at the hearings. Those people, they need to duck down and just stay out of it.
Yep. And the thing is, you know what? There's a great scene from Pulp Fiction. There's a great scene from Pulp Fiction where Marcellus Wallace says, "Pride hurts." Don't just get pushed beyond that shit because it doesn't mean there's no reality to this. Just let it go. We're wrong. And speaking of which, I'm wondering if we're ever going to get to that point with the Reebok sponsorship, but I don't want to step on the rest of the show.
Now that's a segue because the next topic is.
Oh, it's like I'm a mind reader.
You're the UFC. A Reebok executive claims the fighter resentment towards the sponsorship deal is misplaced and, quote, the UFC decides how the fighters are paid. That's not something we get involved in at all, end quote. Your headliners made a combined $5,000 payout from your recent events. Do you take the heat off Reebok, Eugene, and if so, how?
Is your question, as the bald one, do I take the heat off of Reebok or do I not? That's the first question, right?
Yes.
I don't know if I take the heat off of Reebok. I think I might, I might look up from my desk and see that there's a door open and decide, you know what, that door is open for a reason. And I'm going to jump right fucking through it, and I'm either going to publicly try to renegotiate and push for much more than the $7 million 6-year Chandra. That's a mockery of a travesty of a sham. 7 years, 6 years, $7 million. That's just crazy. That's crazy. Even if they were to pay out what people were getting before, I think it would exceed $7 million. Are you kidding me? I personally know a professional fighter who had 1-800-RADIATOR on his shorts and got paid $100,000 for that for one fight.
Oh.
What year was that?
This was 4 years ago.
Wow.
So that was in the heyday, though.
Yeah.
Things have gone down, but still.
Still, if you got guys like Tim Kennedy doing everything humanly possible to get fired so he can fight at Bellator, it's calculus at this point. How many fights do I have left? 6. How much sponsorship did I make per fight before? I don't know. Let's say $60,000. 6 times $60,000 in the next 6 years, I could put a down payment on a fucking house. I could at least have that, you can't 6 times 5,000. Get the fuck out of here.
And the interesting thing is it kind of segues into something that Nate had talked about earlier with regard to surrogates, because on one level one would say, well, why isn't Scott Coker being more, why isn't he dealing with this issue publicly? because the surrogates are. Not saying that he's telling Josh Thompson and Tim Kennedy, hey, talk about how much money you made with us. The fact of the matter is people were making good money working for him. He doesn't need to say anything.
Correct. So back to circle back around to the Reebok deal. This deal is an abortion, and it needs to I don't know if there's a clause in it to renegotiate, but even the jungle wants it dead. And having the Reebok mouthpiece come out and sprinkle some sprinkle some crack on it, like Dave Chappelle says, it's not diverting, it's inflaming, and it puts the Baldwin in a position where he's going to have to do something. But no matter what he does, it will of course be totally inadequate. If he fires back, of course he's still got other he's got other issues now to deal with. And if he doesn't fire back, it's like he can't. It's almost a checkmate for him. So he's got, and either which way he goes, he's going to cause problems. So he might as well go where the wind is blowing, in my mind,
And do what when the wind is blowing? Just
and at this point now, just step out through that door and fuck Reebok. You don't hear the guys at Harley Davidson complaining. The beer for whatever happens. You don't hear those guys complaining. You don't hear fans complaining about those guys. They probably have an increased positive reaction when I'm sitting and watching a pay-per-view, or not the UFC Fight Night, and Harley comes out. I go, hey man, their bikes are actually kind of nice. I have a positive connection to the advertisers. I do not have this feeling with Reebok. It's like, Jesus Christ, look at that shit. I could drunk design something better than that. That's what I'm thinking. And
that is a challenge. That is a challenge.
Going to Foot Locker to buy some shoes, I will purposely go out of my way to not buy Reebok. Why? Because it feels like, and they've done a really good job of combining them, it feels like I'm fucking a fighter.
How about you, Nate?
Well, one thing I would want to say
not in a good way.
Is that Dana's in the position, if you've ever been behind the counter working retail, that's where Dana White is with this deal. Because if you're working retail, you're representing the company for a paycheck that you obviously desperately need, or you would not be working retail, because it just sucks unless you're just a desperate extrovert that has to have human contact. Most people hate working retail because customer comes up to the counter with an irrational complaint, and you have to smile and say, oh, of course, sir. I understand, sir. Yes, sir. We'll get on that right away, sir. And then at least give the impression to the customer that you're doing something to solve their problem, that you take their concerns seriously, no matter how whack and crazy and bullshit the problems are. You can't go, hey, look at this jackass, which is Dana White's inclination. Because Dana White wants to sell more corporate sponsorships, so he's got to show a certain amount of deference and willingness to work with this company. He cannot just throw them in the grease the way he does his fighters, because fighters have to come to him. The UFC has a monopsony on high talented fighters. They do not have any kind of lock on the market for corporate sponsorships whatsoever. I mean, you look at like the Big Ten College Football Conference, their TV rights deal is about the size of the UFC TV rights deal. That's how small a fish the UFC is in the overall pond. Somebody like Reebok, no matter how low they are on the apparel totem pole, they've got options. And other companies like Under Armour and Gillette, anybody, they see how the UFC treats Reebok, especially when the chips are down, and they're going to be watching this shit, and they think, do I want to get in bed with these people? Do I want to partner with these people? So Dana White has to, as much as he can, cover for Reebok, take this shit, let the UFC be the bad guy here, or they poison their relationship with corporate America, and I don't think that's something they can afford to do.
I think you're. I don't know. I think you're actually wrong. I think the people in a position to.
I'm in a sport coat, Eugene. I'm in a sport coat.
And I'm in a U.S. Open. Fuck Eugene over shirt. So.
Let's not forget about the second place finish on Knuckle Up.
No, you mean last place.
Some say last place, some say second place.
No, okay.
So your beef, Eugene, you said you disagree.
No, I'm saying that. I'm saying that. You know who's enjoying the fuck out of this? I'll tell you who's enjoying the fuck out of it. Nike. Nike is enjoying the fuck out of it. And Nike is capable of discerning how Reebok did it. In fact, they're probably teaching master classes right now. This show is called If I Did It. Master classes on how not to do it, it is pretty clear to me that this is a biz school object lesson and fucking up, and other companies will say, look, this is what we do not need to do. It's not about, oh, did the UFC look? It's about a mid-course correction that was much needed. Biz schools would praise Dana, the Baldwin, for making a strategic decision that was hard but necessary.
Well, that's to pull out of the deal, but I'm talking about what he says publicly. Even if they're cutting their losses on the deal, I think publicly they can be as vicious as they want behind the scenes. I'm just talking publicly. Dana needs to take some of the heat off Reebok and conduct himself professionally and like a good corporate partner.
You're saying even if he says goodbye, good luck.
Even if in the background they're saying, this is a disaster and we need to get out of it.
Well, I mean, publicly, what do they say? Diplomacy is the art of saying nice doggy till you get your hand on the rock. The Baldwin should be saying nice doggy a lot these days for many different reasons.
No doubt.
Speaking about positions that dogs are in, sometimes crouched over, and Eugene, you're Chad Mendes. First, Eugene Robinson planted the seeds that your fight against Conor McGregor was shady.
Yep.
Now Frankie Edgar questioned your performance. He was not
impressed. When is the world going to apologize to me?
Well, here's the thing. You're Chad in this situation, so do you capitalize, Chad Mendes, on the controversy for your upcoming Edgar fight?
You know what? As soon as that check fucking cleared, Chad would had to do it's. Let's go back to Raging Bull and Jake LaMotta in the dressing room. You cry it out. You fucking move ahead. You can't. You took the check, man. Okay. And I mean, you did what everybody needed you to do. You gotta deal. I mean, see, this is the thing. Humans are irrational actors, man. This is the painful realization that the Baldwin is having. So if you don't think this guy is having buyer's remorse on Monday, he's like, let those who have knowledge know. Okay, let those who have knowledge know what? That you guys know that I could have. I'm calling in a favor. You gotta know this. And the number of people, he catches women looking at him across the gym like, all of a sudden the check doesn't feel like it's sufficient recompense for the hit that his brand has taken. Swallow that pride, son. Move ahead, because whatever you got paid, the sport loves you for it. The company loves you for it. This is the price of being a company man. He was saying afterward, man, I've been having some sleepless nights. Of course you have. You know what that is? That's that little voice talking that Marcellus talks about. It's pride. You know what? Use it in the fight? No. This is not going to help you. Not at all.
What do you think, Nate?
I think he's got to just – Eugene's right. There's no upside for Chad on this. He lost the fight. I think he needs to – if somebody – if Edgar, I think there's two things that he needs to do. Building some heat for a fight with Edgar keeps him out of the Lost Battalion. Mendes has not faced Edgar. It's a live fight. I think Mendes has excellent chances. Edgar's the anointed substitute for Conor McGregor or Jose Aldo should they get hurt and not be able to fight at UFC 154. So Edgar's ahead of Mendes in the pack, but not by much. Frankie Edgar's the captain in the Lost Battalion. This is his second division to wander through. And so Mendes – there's an upside for Mendes in trash-talking Frankie Edgar and building some heat here. And he has to defend his performance. He didn't throw that fight. I mean, if anything, the referee called it quickly, but Mendes didn't have anything to do with the referee stopping the fight. That was the ref, not Mendes. And I think he put on a hell of a fight against Conor McGregor on short notice. So stand up for your work, defend your honor, and smack-talk Frankie Edgar. There's nothing but winning it for him.
Oh, the return of the sound effect curveball.
And millions of people in America go like this.
Dozens, Eugene.
It's a litmus test. Some people love sound effects, some people don't. But anyway, you got it. So, Eugene, you're Chewbacca. You're arrested for illegally campaigning for Darth Vader in the Ukraine and fined for resisting arrest. Your new movie, The Force Awakens, opens December 17th. How do you handle the PR blowback? This actually happened.
Yeah, I know. So you say, how do you, what's the antecedent to you? Who's the you you're talking about? Chewy?
Chewy.
Well, first of all, you get Dallas on the horn. Dallas! Tell you about that guy. Get Dallas on the horn because he's a big Chewy fan. I mean, I'm sorry, man. I'm. You know what? Let me be the first to tell America your continued obsession with a 1977 movie about outer space shit is fucking pathetic. I saw Star Wars 1, and then maybe on airplane saw some version of 2 or 3, got lost in the shuffle. You got 4, 5, 6. It just, it doesn't fucking matter, man. And this is coming from a guy who's seen every James Bond movie. It's the same fucking story, so,
See, you don't appreciate the complexity of, and because of that, we're going to ask Nate, how are you going to handle this Chewbacca?
The Ukrainian elections are a clusterfuck. They're in the middle of a civil war / invasion with Russia. They, following up on a coup or a push or a democratic revolution, whatever you want to call it. I don't think you can look to the Ukrainian political situation for PR pointers of any kind, except it's notable to note that one of the mayoral candidates there in Ukraine had nude photos leaked, and her standing in the polls immediately skyrocketed. So it's this is the kind of country where they regularly have fistfights on the floor of Parliament, and that's when there's not gunplay involved on the floor of Parliament. So I don't know. And I'm with Eugene on the whole Star Wars thing. I was a kid. I was 7. I was in the Star Wars demo. It was great. I had all the toys. Empire Strikes Back was even better. I was 12. The Ewoks I was a little bit old for. And then in the 90s, I was excited when The Phantom Menace came out, and that shit sucked. That was an interminable, awful, garbage movie. I didn't even watch the second and third one. And now they're trying to give it a reboot because the millennial kids are just,
because they got nothing.
No, you know what? Here's the thing you got to keep in mind is the fact that with it, as someone that's totally contrary in opinion to you guys with it, the fascinating thing about it is the original trilogy that came out back in the day was great. When George Lucas came back to make money, because that's what it was all about with the prequels, it's true. The first 2 sucked.
And explain whatever convoluted.
But the fascinating thing is when they created this TV show, The Clone Wars, they took it away from him. And The Clone Wars, which I think was always funny, was it was Apocalypse Now because you're dealing with troops. Like, I'm programmed to do this. Should I do this? It's Apocalypse Now for kids. Like, that was on for 6 seasons. They fleshed out stuff George Lucas couldn't. And now that the franchise is away from him with people that actually can tell a coherent story, it's going to be fascinating to see what people can do, with regard to that. So I would suggest that if you check out some Clone Wars, it's actually the show, which he was not involved with, other than like giving advice now and then, which they ignored. It's actually they actually have some really good episodes, especially the 3rd and 4th season. Anyway,
I feel like I'm listening to Sam I Am talking.
Hey, I love Sam I Am, and if you read the end of the book, he loves the green eggs and ham. And I got to say, their PR rollout of this has been masterful. They have washed away the bad taste of the George Lucas movies to a great extent, and people are hyped for this movie.
When I'm hearing of people whining and complaining that the guy takes off his mask and the Star Troop that black people have the audacity to exist in the future.
Right.
I just have to go. I'm fucking. I'm out.
But every genre of entertainment has dumbasses and racists. And speaking of which, we have a new feature called the Teachable Moment, where there's a horrendous PR kerfuffle that occurs, and in retrospect, we break it down. So this inaugural edition of the Teachable Moment segment, I'm going to start with you, Nate. You're South by Southwest. You cancel 2 panels on harassment in games because of, quote, numerous threats of on-site violence, end quote. Outrage ensues because you let the terrorists win. How do you get back your mojo?
Well, they've got to reel this back and walk it back. They screwed up bad and played themselves in a big way. Now they've got BuzzFeed and my own employers, Vox Media, who are putting the show on, pulling out because Vox Media and BuzzFeed have both been through the Gamergate situation. Vox Media owns The Verge and Polygon, which are some of the biggest video game and technology sites out there. They've covered Gamergate, which whether you, I don't know if people paid attention, but that basically boils down to sort of a right-wing male backlash against women in video games journalism. And it was puffed up, but it basically boiled down to a bunch of white guys harassing women way over the edge, like calling out SWAT teams to people's houses, doxing people, putting out their personal information.
Talking about raping 9-year-old nieces and giving addresses of.
Yeah, calling for rapes, rape threats, death threats, bomb threats, all this stuff.
And you thought the Star Wars people were weird, huh?
Yeah. This stuff was real enough that several people had to move. Numerous writers dropped out of the field. For publications like The Verge, it meant, some serious online hassle and headache I can't go into, and again, multiple threats. And so what Vox has learned is you don't put up with this shit at all. You don't facilitate the discussion. There's not really a reasonable discussion happening here. If you look down at what Gamergate boils down to, it's a bunch of bratty crybabies trying to threaten people out of having a discussion. It's not an open discussion. It's not an honest discussion of journalistic ethics in video games, which is the original allegation that some woman had slept with somebody to get something or other. It boils down to whiny bullshit and terroristic threats and hate crimes. And South by was apparently oblivious to all this shit, had no idea what they were getting into. They had ample warning. There were signs during the process for voting for panels and selecting panels when Reddit and various Gamergate groups started, plowing into the comments and trying to downvote these panels. And one of the panels is basically Gamergate people trying to get their nose in, and doing a panel under semi-false pretext. And they let all that slide, and then at the last minute, they get some threats, and they shit their pants. This is a big, big conference. This is a conference that shuts down a major American city every year. They've got access to police, fire departments.
Millions of dollars.
Yeah, millions and millions of dollars. This is a conference that hosts CEOs, major sports athletes, rock stars, filmmakers. They're capable of doing security for this.
And they even had a shooting last year, didn't they?
It was a drunken driving incident. It was 2 years ago. Multiple people died in a police chase that the perpetrator ran from the police and drove his car through a barricade and ran over a bunch of people in a crowd, which the conference isn't liable for that. But they've created this very crowded situation. There are already a lot of hostility in Austin against them, and now there's a lot of hostility in the tech community against them. And I think they've got to do something. Put on a new panel, invite the people, have this discussion. They can't back down to harassment, or they're going to lose their corporate sponsors and corporate participation, which is their whole cachet. So they've got to reel this back. They've got to eat some crow. They've got to do something to make it right. They can't just do PR. They have to substantively address these issues at the conference and move on. That's all they can do.
What about you, Eugene?
All right, total disclosure. I have actually not only played South by Southwest about 8 or 9 times, but the guy who kept booking us was a good friend, and so on. But I have to say that there's a point at which we decided to no longer play South by Southwest, and that was probably about 6 years ago, where we decided that this is just whatever promise they've convinced bands that they were going to get or garner just wasn't happening, and I was starting to feel like I was in Silicon Valley South in terms of the douchebag. I tell you, the turning point for me was when a guy came up to me and my drummer in a bar and tried to sell us a new app, and I said, okay, well, what does it do? He goes, oh, it's great. It lets you know what bar you're at.
Very handy when you're absolutely shit-faced.
Like your target audience is like vicious alcoholics. 1% of us who are drinking, And the guy kind of shook his head. It's like, yeah, ice.com. We sell you ice. Get the fuck out of here. So since then, I've watched them book as headliners Ray Davies. I've watched it become, a corporate business, a circle jerk. And I don't think it has much to do with anything other than exploiting the aspirations of up-and-coming young bands who don't know any better, which is fine. The tech sector, that's fine. But, there comes a point which you get so disengaged from what's happening on the ground that, like Hitler, you start making demands of your troops that are completely fucking insane and out of touch with the zeitgeist. And so that's precisely where they are. How could they not see this? How could they not see this? I mean, these guys are not paying attention. After they get to 100 million and they lose count, they got to start again. They're not paying attention to what's happening on the ground, and there's no way to get it back. You take a CMJ, College Music Journal, that's slow and steady, winning the race. That's still got some cachet. You got Europe's Pukkelpop. It's still got some cachet as a place to go for real fans of music. But South by Southwest has been a money grab for at least the last 6 years, and that's fine. That's fine. But, don't act like it's anything else. Like Burning Man. Oh, you're a plaything of the frickin' rich. Burning Man. A bunch of lawyers and CEOs getting high in the desert with women trying to service them. It's gotta stop. I mean,
so it's South by Southwest Lost Battalion.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That South by Southwest has been dead, and just because they're making money doesn't make them any less dead. I mean, this is why when a corporation does something, and the first corporation that I had something to do with was Intel. And Intel had this rounding error on one of its chips, and at first Chipgate. At first, the corporate response was just deal with it, and then people flipped out, and Andy Grove oh, mid-course correction, we will make good on all these chips, and it died down, moved ahead. Again, a great teachable moment of how you deal with this stuff. Immediately put it to bed, and then fire the person who put you in that position in the first place. I mean, look at United Airlines. United Airlines is another corporation in motion right now who consistently and continually makes the wrong mistake always, forever. They made a handicapped guy crawl down the aisle. The entire flight crew watches this guy crawl down the aisle because, we had his wheelchair here and he wasn't ready, so we sent it away. It reminds me of Noel Coward and Jack Jones. You want this dick? Come crawl for it. Okay, this guy has to crawl down the entire aisle as they watch him. Fuck United Airlines.
Speaking about dicks, is Louie CK in the Lost Battalion too?
You got to get the background on this because this is a humdinger.
You've been listening to Knuckle Up, right? So okay. Allegedly.
Don't you love that word? It's my favorite word.
Yeah, I'm into the stand-up comedy community. These guys. So allegedly, the information I get is that after a show, Louie CK allegedly says to two female comics, "Hey, you want to drinking at the bar? Hey, you want to come up to my room?" And they go, "Yeah, sure. Let's go up to your room. We'll drink. Hey, we're gonna hang out with Louie CK in this room." So they're drinking, laughing, talking, drinking, laughing, talking. At a certain point, like the good Lothario that this divorced man is, he says, "Hey, you girls mind if I jerk off?" And they go, "Shit, he's a funny guy. Go ahead, funny guy." And what happens next is funny guy actually produces his penis and begins masturbating, right? So at this point, as real as it gets, like the UFC, the female comedians finish their drinks and go, we gotta go. And Louie CK allegedly jumps in front of the door and says, "I'm not finished yet." And so he blocks the door until he blows his load and then says, "Good luck and good night." And they're telling people, not because they're saying that there's a Cosby thing happening, not because the discussion as it's emerged is just, is this sexual predation or not? So it's been a pretty interesting discussion on certain forums and certain boards. The news hasn't gone national because what? The guy's, divorced man trying to get laid, I mean, his methods might be unsound, but who among us hasn't asked someone if they could jerk off and then jerk off in public, in the privacy of your hotel room in public?
Well, I mean, this is one of those things where nobody has come out and named names. Jen Kirkland, who's a comedian, has outlined someone who sounds very much like Louie CK publicly and described this, and there's lots of rumors that this is him, and that's who she's talking about. But one, this is not illegal behavior. It might be unsavory, it might be unpleasant, but these are adult women he did this with, and according to the story, he asked for their consent. Now, whether there was a confusion, some regrets, buyer's remorse, whatever, that's not on him.
Unless if he blocks the door, that's when it's a problem, though.
At that point, it's definitely problematic, and it's not a good look. It's not appealing. The whole bit. I mean, not that I can throw stones at anybody's predilections, but.
Well, hold on. Let's change it up for a second. The cops are in your hotel room, and you are masturbating. Well, the cops in your hotel room, and the cop says, "Look, I've had enough of this action. I gotta go." And you stand in front of the cop and say, "Let me finish first." I think you'd probably get arrested for for kidnapping and then subsequently beaten up. I mean, it's a small thing. You got to parse this stuff carefully. But if you're in a hotel room and you ask somebody if you could jerk off, no harm, no foul. If they say, we got to go, then you stand there and go, wait.
Excellent point. I got to concede that. You're absolutely right. I was wrong about that. That's unsavory, possibly illegal, definitely lawsuit country. Either way, what he needs to do is make things right. He needs to get a personal assistant with a checkbook like Cosby had.
Well, yes, maybe. If I'm him, I right, like Pee Wee Herman was great. First thing he did, go on David Letterman after he gets busted in the theater for masturbating in public at the Pussycat Theater in L.A. He goes.
I thought it was Florida.
Oh, wherever. So he goes into the David Letterman. He sits down. The audience is going crazy. Letterman is doing this kind of mugging thing, and Pee Wee Herman, the first thing out of his mouth says, "Heard any good jokes lately?"
I mean, see, Louie needs to decide, is this something I have to, because this is a very important thing. You don't want to get out there and talk about it if it's not something you need to be talking about. Like, if this is going to blow over, you let it blow over.
He doesn't need to talk about it, but what he has to, and keep in mind, the women are not saying this. But what he needs to distance himself from, as soon as they say those words, Bill Cosby, then you gotta jump to the left or jump to the right and say, hey, I'm just a guy jerking off in the room, you know.
Yeah, he needs to have a game plan. He needs to be ready to apologize. He needs to be able to offer people some sweet gigs on his show, opening slots on his tours.
Tough out there for a female comic. However, let me be clear. If my daughter is a 25, 30-year-old stand-up comedian, and she calls me and says, Dad, you won't believe what happened, and tells me this story about Louie CK, I do not show up and beat him to within an inch of his life. I don't. In actual fact, I don't. Men do strange things.
What if he was a Nazi?
No, man,
we hadn't mentioned him up.
No, you missed it. I got the Nazis in there.
He did. He got Hitler in there a ways back, possibly the first topic.
You missed it. Yeah. So, there's certain things, like Bill Cosby, I show up and I beat him to within an inch of his fucking life. Dad, I woke up, my underwear was on backwards, and Bill was in the bathroom. That man he's getting murked that night, But this Louie CK thing, it's like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, look, I hate to say it, but drinking in a hotel room, never going to be a good look. Sorry, you just don't. I don't leave. I might have cash in my car. Don't leave it on the front seat. Not a good look.
Yeah. I don't think anybody was killed in the making of this fiasco. I don't think Louie's in the Lost Battalion though, because the work is what. Alexis trying to give me cues.
Yeah, they stalled. He stumbled.
I'm stalling and stumbling. That's what I do. I had a catchphrase last week. Now I can't remember what it was. What was my new catchphrase?
I believe it was, we'll be back next week. We can't discuss what it is, but whatever.
I thought it was buckle me up, buddy.
What does that mean?
I'm just making shit up, man. I'm tired.
All right, well,
and Halloween is upon us, and since you mentioned Sam I Am, in honor of that and Halloween.
Jesus Christ! What's happened to us? What's happened to us?
Indeed. All right, that's a wrap. So if you like the show, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Subscribe to MMANation.com on YouTube. Subscribe to MMA Nation on iTunes, and you can hear the audio-only version, which then you wouldn't be able to see the special effects Alexi's been dropping on us. Zane Simon should be back with some kind of prospectus or something or other. We'll have the Heavy Hands podcast. Eugene will be back on Monday with Knuckle Up. There's no MMA this weekend, not even any big fights, so it's going to be a post-Halloween episode of Knuckle Up. Then we roll into another UFC, busy November for the UFC, so we'll have all the fixins, all the care, don't care previews, the vivisections, the prospectuses, the 6 rounds, everything you've come to expect. Prospecti?
Nah, I'm just fucking with you,
These
man.
Ivy League West Coasters. Anyway, follow us on Twitter at KidNate, at Alexi Auld, AULD, at Eugene S. Robinson. And you can read Eugene at Aussie.com, sometimes on Vice's Fightland. You can also buy the Fight book on Kindle and a few hardback editions directly from Eugene. Check out Alexi Old on Amazon.
I will sign my name and draw a penis next to it.
Talk about
kidding.
value add.
Kidding.
So he won't value add like that. Anyway, and that's our show. We'll be back next week. And next week, I'll remember what my catchphrase was because it was genius.
It was.
What's up, buddy?
All right. Adios, MMA aficionados. We'll see you next time.
All right,
guys.
Later.